to Charlotte and Jakob and Mette, if you have something to kind of address and reflect on the approach that Yaroslav and the colleagues from the Forum of the Nations for PostRussia, how challenging this will be in the current setting of Europe. What can we do to have this thinking to be sort of born and bear some fruit?
I think it's extremely important to give voice to indigenous populations of Russia. I know now that Denmark is chair of the Arctic Council, and here you have actually Greenland very much sharing it, and thereby also inviting in the Sami people and the Russian indigenous organization called IPON is for the small indigenous populations of the Russian north. But the thing is, Ripon was captured by the Russian state, so it's not an independent indigenous voice, but no matter what, it's still part of that discussion. They're still invited into the center. So we have to find ways, it could be through the Council of Europe or OSCE, to invite them in, to make them visible. So I think the visibility is extremely important. And then, for us all here, all these, it's like potentially 41 nations. You could say after the Soviet Union, it was 15 states that emerged, that had been sort of covered by a carpet. Now it's 41 nations that have been covered by the carpet of the Russian Federation, the Russian Empire. So it's an uncovering. It should also be seen as a discovery, a possibility of a much more diverse world.
Jakob, and how to avoid, how to do that? So the question the same to you as to Charlotte, but also how to avoid, Kremlin has this way of like weaponizing everything and everybody, so how to make sure that we address the risks of, we're going to be thinking that we're speaking to the genuine voices of captive nations, but in reality it's going to be actually Shoigu speaking, who's been, Russified, converted, forever damned.
Abducted and drugged. Yeah, but I think actually it starts with the theory of victory that we were talking about, because we need to make sure that I won't say the West, because it's probably Europe that needs to break the Russian army in Ukraine, and then these issues need to be incorporated in that. But it all starts with us believing that we must end this, and it's ironic because now we're losing, for the time being at least, the US, and it's interesting because NATO is really good, and it was a US-driven organization, and all the US has talked about since the war started in Ukraine can't become a member of NATO. And if we sit here at this day and age, Ukraine is probably the country in Europe that would uphold Article 5. And the rest of us would go, we don't want to get into that scenario. But I think
the irony is that we're doing this without being the democratic.
Yeah, a lot of ironies. So I mean, we need to reverse all that in the discourse. Have the theory of victory, and if the US wants to rejoin the free nations sometime, they're more than welcome. But we need to define it ourselves and stop waiting for some imaginary help that's not going to come.
Yes, I very much agree with that. First things first, and for the time being, it's necessary to focus on how to defeat Russia militarily, and it's not going to be easy, but it's a good idea to face the fact that we are on our own, and it's doable, and that we should not let ourselves tyrannized by Kremlin propaganda. Also, concerning the Kremlin is playing on our fear of the Russian collapse, but I haven't studied local politics in Russia, but one of my colleagues, Kaarsbo, has studied the way regional governors actually act in Russia, and his findings are that without much fuss, they're really the glue of Russia today, in a much more constructive sense than one would imagine. Of course, they are corrupt and they're Russians after all, most of them. But they try to do their best to keep their local community together, and very often they are popular. Some of them are communists, but they are efficient in their own Russian manner. So the point is that Russia is not necessarily going to collapse in a very dramatic and unpleasant manner. It may not be quite a peaceful walk in the park, but we should not let ourselves tyrannize by the possibility of Russia falling apart. Also because of the fact that because Russia is becoming more and more of a totalitarian dictatorship, it's also becoming more and more brittle. And we know from the fate of the Syrian dictator Assad that one day he was the dictator of Syria, feared by everyone, and the next day he was out of business. So, I mean, you cannot predict when Russia is going to collapse, and it probably will be a surprise for everyone.
Thank you, Madam. Yeah.
And now he might be dead in the ditch. Somewhere.
I think Oleg had a reaction. I really wanted to open up to the floor. Maybe you have, I'm sure you have some questions to our experts. So please be ready with questions, but Oleg wanted to say something.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I wanted to continue about the strategy, a vision of victory, that it's not enough just to help Ukraine to defend itself, but it should be strategy of defeat Moscovia. And it should be not only be the strategy, it should be the roadmap. It should be a real project plan how to do it. And we should also understand that it can't be only reflection. Now, Moscow do something and we make some action after it. We should have strategy and our own narratives how to do it, and this way, if you could just one more time show the map, I think that the decolonization, the idea, but I think, the decolonization idea of try to change this northern Eurasia areas to some dozen of new independent states, it could be a part of this scenario. Not only one scenario, strategy, but one of the most. And last remarks before we start, it's about that very important is vocabulary. So even we Ukraine and also me and also Yaroslav say about minorities. For example, Tiva people in Tiva, it's not minorities. It's indigenous people and it's captive nation. It was independent from 1922 till 1944. It includes Russia when it was the Second World War. They're not minorities. It's like Ukrainian or Estonian people weren't minority in the USSR. We are also the captive nation, and there is a bill in United States which Congress voted in, as far as I remember, 1957, and the President and the House Senate about the captive nation. At that time, captive nation was Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Hungary, Slovak, Ukraine, but also in this bill they mentioned Cossacks people, so Don Republic. They also mentioned Idel Urals people from Tatarstan, Bashkortostan. So we already have even some tools which are in the United States. They have this week of captive nation every July before the president of Trump. So the last one was when President Biden signed in 2024, this first week of July. And we could, and I hope Yaroslav and some probably members of parliament of Denmark and some diplomats will have to create such groups in European Parliament, in national parliament, because we should advocate this idea like a part of our strategy, offensive and asymmetric action, and not just reflection against Moscow. And the last remark, sorry, because it's very important. Juraj mentioned about that Russia can't be democratic state. Yeah, Russia can be democratic state, but Russia could be democratic in a poly-statehood, when it was not one this area which bigger than South America, but there will be several different moments. And about this Russian such-called opposition, like Voltaire said more than 200 years ago about the such-called the Holy Roman Empire of German nation, it wasn't holy, it wasn't Roman, and it wasn't empire. The same situation with such-called Russian liberal opposition. It isn't Russian, it's Moscow. It's Moscow-centric, so it isn't represent even Russian people, for example, from Khabarovsk or Siberia. It isn't liberal because they are imperialistic. They in mind wanted just to change the surname of bad side Putin for some new one, good side or not very good side, and they aren't real opposition because they are created or controlled, most of them, of course not of them, we have people like Kasparov or some other people, but mostly controlled by FSB and other Russian special service, try to pretend that they are opposition, try to make believable people in the way that it's just enough to change Putin and everything will be okay. There will be one more разрядка, перезагрузка, оттепель, reset or reborn, like they do it 3 times before. So we should be very pensioned for that, because it's also the game of Russian special service. Have bad policemen like Lavrov, Solovyov, Simonyan, Patrushev, Medvedev, and good policemen who are predictable, they are democratic. Thanks.
So we need to be more educated, we need to be smarter, we need to see through, and we need to have our own strategy of victory. Okay, we're happy to take questions from the floor. Who would like to start? I'm sure there will be, or maybe some comments or reflections. Maybe share with us what you've learned, something that you have not known before you came into this room.